Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Dominions 5. This is the Phlegra campaign here, but we're not actually playing our single-player Phlegra campaign today. Instead, I want to take some time to talk a little bit about scripting. Tactics in battle, positioning units, and scripting mages, which is an extremely complicated and somewhat mysterious subject in some ways. So, when you're... How do I start? You have to script in different ways at different stages of the game. And mainly that's because your magic changes and what you can do with it changes. Let's start by talking about troops. So if we look at our army setup screen, troops are your main body, your main part of your army in the early game. And during early expansion, and even very early game wars, how you set up your troops is more important than how you set up mages. Mages then rapidly begin to eclipse them. If you look at my battlefield setup here, you'll notice that I kind of have my troops spread out in this semicircular formation, and then I have a few at the back, or well, in this case, it's one guy left at the back. This is because... so in early game battles, where you're expanding with sacreds or something like that, all you have to do, of course, is put your troops at the front and rush forward. Specific positioning is often fairly unimportant. If you're blessing people, you have to make sure you have a priest who can cast the blessing spell close to them, and you may have to have them hold. But in general, when you have small battles with few troops, just having them at the front is good enough. As battles become more complicated, troop positioning becomes more and more important. So you have the basic concepts: infantry at the front, archers in the rear, cavalry on the flanks. That's pretty much the same as any strategy game, but there are some specific issues with troops that have to be considered for Dominions. As magic becomes a part of the game, as magic becomes part of battles, and specifically as damaging evocations become part of battles, where your troops are in relation to your mages becomes important. If you look here, you'll notice I don't have any troops overlapped with my mages themselves. That's because when you are casting damaging spells, damaging evocations, your mages and enemy mages will tend to prefer to aim towards concentrations of HP, especially concentrations of HP that don't have resistance to the type of damage they're causing. So if we look again at this, when I broke the siege at Nashna, my Trophimos oppressors killed a whole bunch of people with Thunderstrikes. Let's take a look at this real quick. So, up here, I have my Mouflons, and they're moving forward. Mouflons have quite a bit of hit points, 19 hit points each. They have low protection, very low defense skills. They're resistant to cold, but not to anything else. What this means is, in general, enemy mages who are firing non-cold damage spells will kind of want to aim at Mouflons. My Heal-Up Warriors have 10 hit points, so what's relevant is the hit points per square. So Heal-Up Warriors have 30 hit points per square, because there's 3 of them in a square. Mouflons have 38 hit points in a square, and actually with slightly lower protection. So overall, enemy damage spells would prefer to aim for Mouflons over Heal-Up Warriors. Mouflons also have very low magic resistance, and Heal-Up Warriors have twice the magic resistance, so magic resistance negates spells will also tend to go for Mouflons. This is one of the major use of Mouflons on the battlefield. There are several other units that are like this. By deploying units of low defense, high HP models, you can effectively create sponges that will tend to soak up a lot of enemy damage magic if the enemy is using damage magic. That's also one use for Gigante Warriors. So long as the enemy isn't casting fire spells, they will tend to aim at Gigante Warriors because Gigante Warriors have 62 hit points in every square. On my side, as I said, I don't have troops intermixed with my mages. That's because if I had the Mouflons like here, and the enemy started casting damage spells while they were passing through my mage formations, my mages are kind of spread out, damage spells would be aimed at this part of the battlefield. And arrows, which use very similar targeting, would be aimed at this part of the battlefield. Instead, I have arrows. If my enemy has archers, the arrows are being aimed here, and possibly over here. I might get some scatter into these mages, but since I'm casting defensive buffs, they can probably live. What I want, basically, is for the enemy damage to be aimed at the parts of my army that I don't care about, while the parts of my army that I do care about, the mages, do work without being shot to death. In terms of combat scripting, in Dominions 4, you could very easily predict where and when everything was going to be, especially when it came to Independents, who always deployed in the center of their deployment zone. In Dominions 5, with the real-time combat, that's much less important, so you don't have to stress so much about putting your units in exactly the right square. As opposed to in Dominions 4, you could get a very significant tactical advantage by placing, say, a trampling squadron 1 square forward versus 1 square back. And you don't have to worry about that kind of stuff anymore. Instead, more general placement is important in Dominions 5. Obviously, you want infantry in the front. Your evocation soakers, these guys like ogres, you can summon ogres to perform this function. There's some other summons that are really good at it. Vine men, vine ogres are probably the preeminent example. Mouflons are good for Phlegra. There's a few others that you can use in this purpose. Should be up front, usually, and probably off to a side somewhere. Basically, you want those damage spells that are being aimed at these guys to be aimed away from the rest of your army. You do need a pack of evocation soakers, because if the AI will calculate in their chances of missing, and if by missing they might hit another square of a good target, that will incline them further towards aiming in that direction. In the early game, as I said, your troops are the important part, and the important thing is directing enemy targeting away from your valuable troops. In the mid-game, however, the important part of your battlefield is the mages, and so directing damage away from the mages is what matters. So you can see here, you can see my Thunder Strikes are being targeted at 2 different places. They're being targeted up front, where you have ghouls, because ghouls have no protection and reasonable hit points. I'm not sure why. I think the AI still prefers low protection units even when it's firing armor negating damage, which is what Thunderstrike is. Because it doesn't tend to target like Allay Legionnaires that have 14 protection, even though they have the same hit points as ghouls. Or it may assign higher value to the ghouls because they're undead and have the poison claw. The AI is a little bit inscrutable, so you can only sort of try to guide it. It's also, however, firing back here at the archers, and I do think that the AI has some kind of preference for targeting ranged units, possibly because they have the potential to do damage back to your mages, which melee troops really don't so long as there's somebody in front of them. The AI also tends to target whoever's closer to an extent. So the ghouls are the closest, the ghouls are getting hit primarily, and then we have some shots scattering elsewhere on the battlefield. When it comes to mage versus mage fights, having your mages away from your troops can be super, super important, because you can't direct exactly where your mages will aim. So if I have mages back here and a blob of troops up here, the enemy mages will tend to rain destruction on my troops, and my mages will tend to rain destruction on their troops, instead of going for the mages. The exception is if you're using single target, very high damage spells, including magic resistance negate spells, then they will tend to go for high value targets, which is really, really nice, because they'll tend to try to, if you're casting Soul Slay or something, they will tend to try to snipe out giants and commanders, as opposed to scattering damage among the troops. They will still scatter damage among the troops sometimes, but they will try to aim for high value targets. When the scripting becomes complicated, you can tell that I'm having a hard time thinking of how to put all this stuff. Scripting becomes complicated as armies become more complicated. When you have to worry about flyers or cavalry flanking you, then you have to start putting troops in different places. So I think we've watched enough of this. Let's head back to the army setup screen. So in this case, I knew that the enemy army was composed entirely of infantry. They didn't have cavalry, they didn't have, because I saw them besiege me last turn. They didn't have cavalry, they didn't have flyers, which meant I could form up in this position. So I have my infantry up front, I have my archers back and on the flanks, so they're a little ways away from my mages, and not going to, they're not going to draw fire directly into the middle of my mage blob, but they can shoot effectively. I have my cavalry on the flank, and I just had like this couple guys back here just in case. If the enemy has flyers or cavalry, those flyers and cavalry may be set on attack rear orders. Attack rear is not 100% reliable, but it means they're going to try to come down the flanks and get into your back lines. That means that having mages in the back is a really bad idea. You want something behind them, preferably several squads. Dominion's targeting is done on a per squad basis. So when you tell somebody to attack, or attack a specific target, they will target one random enemy and their squad. Every commander counts as their own squad. So if you have a whole bunch of independent commanders, like this, where I have a big communion, the odds of one of them being selected to be targeted is pretty high if they're in the backfield. You counteract that by having a whole bunch of small squads of troops scattered around the backfield. So if I'm going up against an enemy with, say, a bunch of wyverns that they've summoned or something, a lot of my infantry are going to be spread out in the back lines. You know, these guys would probably be back there. I would split this squadron up and have them scattered around back there. It's valuable to have that. There's a balance to be struck also between large and small squads, and that's because of the way morale checks work. When you have a squadron of units and they lose a certain fraction of their HP or a certain number of their units, of their models in the unit, and I don't remember exactly what the breakpoint is, but there is a breakpoint, they start taking morale checks. And of course, if they fail a morale check, the whole squadron runs away. So if you have multiple small squads, if I have my guys broken up into like squadrons of 6 Heelot warriors each, as soon as 1 or 2 of them die, they're taking morale checks, and then they're going to run away because their morale is not good. If I have a unit of 30 or 50 or 70, they won't start taking morale checks until, 20 or 30 of them are dead. So they'll stick around longer. The downside is once they go, the whole squadron goes. If you have multiple smaller squads, then only one of the squadrons might run away at any given time while the others might keep fighting. In general, I think it's probably best to have multiple squadrons of around, between 20 and 50. That's large enough that they'll fight for a few rounds without running away from random morale checks, but it's small enough that you can break a large army up into many, many different squadrons and still have some chaff on the battlefield if some of your squadrons start to run. You don't want to go to either extreme. You don't want to have 100 squadrons of 2, and you don't want to have 1 squadron of 200. If you're leading an army with a tyrant, say, who gives a significant morale bonus, then you may want to have large squadrons. These guys have, well, not him. These guys have morale 11, as compared to these guys who have morale 9. That's a significant difference, because he has 2 extra points of Taskmaster. So, it may be worth it to combine troops under the leadership of one very effective leader. But there's also a lot of value in having multiple squadrons scattered around, both for absorbing attack rear orders, and for avoiding one morale check routing your whole front line and leaving all your mages exposed. So, Mage Scripting. Basically, the problem with Mage Scripting is you've got 5 slots and that's it. After your mages run out their 5 slots, they'll just start casting whatever spell they want to cast. And so, ironically, more powerful mages with multiple magical paths tend to be less effective once they go off script, because they have a lot of spells to choose from, and the AI is not 100% reliable in choosing good spells. Excuse me. So, if you have, one guy who has 4 points of water, then he's always going to cast water spells, and you can kind of predict which water spells he'll want to cast. On the other hand, if you have a guy with fire, air, and earth in charge of a communion, once he goes off script, he could be casting anything from any one of those 3 paths, and you can only sort of predict what categories of things he'll want to cast. Like, Trophimos Oppressors tend to like to cast earth buffs after they go off script for a few turns, which is nice because they're low fatigue. But in any case, when you're scripting, the thing to keep in mind with your 5 slots is what you want these mages to accomplish in the context of your army. So, with this army, for example, I'm going up against somebody who doesn't have resistances, and I have access to Thunderstrike, which is a very powerful evocation spell that does armor negating damage. On top of that, my troops are not very good at dealing a lot of damage quickly, and they're a little bit fragile. so they need a lot of support. That being so, there's kind of two ways I could go about this. I could either script my communion to cast primarily buffs in order to make my troops better, and then hope that my troops can carry it, but my troops are weak enough that I don't think they could carry it. So the other strategy is to script them to do direct damage. There's only a few categories of things that mages actually do with their spells, and I find it useful to think of it in categorical terms. Mages can do direct damage. Mages can buff the troops that are already on the field. Mages can summon more troops. And mages can put up battle-wide effects that change the way the battle is fought. An example of a battle-wide effect that changes the battle is Heat from Hell, or Rigor Mortis, or Wailing Winds. These are all spells that have important, long-lasting effects, and they stick around as long as the mage in question is alive. Howl, Relief, even Flaming Arrows, technically, although Flaming Arrows I would consider more of a damage spell, albeit indirect. When you're scripting a mage to do direct damage, the things you need to consider are, you want that mage to be unimpeded, so he won't be killed, obviously. You want the mage to be far enough forward that they can throw those spells accurately. So for instance, Thundershock. Thunderstrike technically has 100 range. It can hit anywhere on the battlefield from anywhere on the battlefield. But range decreases effective precision. Thunderstrike is a fairly accurate spell, but it's only area of effect 1 and it can easily miss. That's why I have them casting Aim. It uses one of my slots, but it increases my precision significantly, up to 17. With the plus 2 Thundershock bonus, they're then effectively precision 19, and the way precision is calculated, points over 10 count for extra. I might not need to cast Aim, but I think it's worthwhile in this context. And that's why I wouldn't want this guy back here, because if he's back here and he's casting at a range of 50, as opposed to a range of 35 or 25, his Thunderstrikes will be deviating a lot more, and that I won't be able to stop that. With effective precision 19, his Thunderstrikes won't deviate, or shouldn't deviate at all, within a fairly decent range. But, of course, that would be useless if he was all the way back here. If you're casting buffs, the positioning of your mages only matters relative to the troops they are buffing. If you're buffing troops, obviously you have to give them hold orders, because you need them to not move while they're getting buffs. So you have to have them set on hold and fire, or hold and attack, or something, to give them time for the spells to land. After that, what you have to do is you have to do something a little bit risky in order to buff troops. You have to put your mages close to them, which means that they can be struck down by random showers of arrows to some extent. Giving mages protective gear or HP increasing gear like the Coral Blade can be very important in this circumstance. When mages are casting buffs, they use a variant of the same targeting they use when they're casting damage spells. They're aiming at friendly units instead of enemies, but they're looking for concentrations of hit points, they're looking for valuable troops, and they're looking for troops close to them. Also, mages love putting buffs on themselves. So if you have a mage sitting here, in the middle of the infantry, you can almost guarantee that when he casts Legions of Steel or Strength of Giants or whatever, it's gonna hit all these guys. If he's standing back here, he might cast it there or even centered on himself, and it might only hit the back half or 2/3. So there's a balance to be struck in terms of putting vulnerable mages close to the infantry in order to encourage them to cast spells on the infantry, but not up front or in the middle of the infantry where their odds of being aced by a random arrow to the head go way up. In general, I find it most useful to put the mages right here, like one step behind the infantry or intermixed with the back line of the infantry. Then the infantry will advance after 2 rounds after being buffed, and at that point the enemy fire will be dragged away from the mage, so he only really has to live through a couple of rounds, which is very, very likely. You will probably lose mages if you're dropping close range buffs on troops. There is one situation in which you actually want mages to be up in line with or in front of the infantry, and that's when they're summoning, especially if they're casting mass summons. If you have a mage that's casting Horde of Skeletons, or if you have a mage that's casting Living Earth or Living Air, those mages you will want to be up here, or possibly back here. Somewhere where the units that they're summoning can have a meaningful effect on the battlefield. If you're casting, let's say if all these 3 guys were all death mages, and I was casting Horde of Skeletons with them, as my infantry advance, I'd be summoning a whole bunch of skeletons right here, and they would stream directly forward. The problem is, they'd get hung up behind my infantry. The purpose of skeletons is to serve as chaff. If they're standing around behind the Heal-It Warriors while the Heal-It Warriors get killed, they're not serving their function. Skeletons do not rout, so I would rather have them in the front line taking the damage than even Heal-It Warriors. So if these guys were all Death Mages, I would put them here. Up here, they're still not terribly likely to be targeted. I might shift the archers back a little bit, and when they summon their skeletons, the skeleton stream will be moving in this direction and probably angling towards the center just a little bit. But in any case, it's not going to be directly behind my infantry, and it will be directly in front of my archers. So it will be blocking an area of the battlefield that I otherwise don't have blockers in. If the enemy has flanking cavalry, my skeletons might also angle up to intercept them, which would be very valuable. This is a little riskier for the mages, and the fact of that risk is one reason why mages like Buddhas, that are a little bit tougher than humans, are very, very valuable. In general, if you're in a very, very large battle, your primary goal is to have blockers covering all the approaches to your mages. You don't want your wizards attacked. At the very, very least, if your mages are going to die, you want them to die after round 5, when they've gotten all of their spells off. So positioning your mages centrally is often good, alternatively splitting them up quite a bit. So if I had individually powerful mages, all of whom were doing different things, then I might put one down here, one up there with the archers, one up front to cast buffs, 2 more in the middle, one up here to summon fire elementals or something. You could see this by looking at my scripting in the Machaka videos that I've put up. In some of those battles, I have Lion Queens all over the map, summoning fire elementals, because of what I want is I want to create essentially a front of fire elementals that can sweep in across most of the battlefield, as opposed to having a big chubby block of them right here where they'll get in each other's way. The only spells where the spells where it doesn't matter where you are, the battlefield-wide enchantments like Howl or Relief or whatever, those mages I would put just kind of fairly far back near a block of troops who can help them if they get in trouble, but not inside a block of troops. You may want to assign them some bodyguards. However, when assigning mages bodyguards, remember, enemy spells will target concentrations of hit points, so do not assign squishy mages Giganti bodyguards. If you assign a squishy mage 5 Giganti bodyguards, the AI is going to look at that part of the map and go, huh, there's 310 hit points in 5 squares. I think I'll chuck a lightning bolt that way and see if I can kill some of it. And your mage will get fried by a lightning bolt. If you're going to assign mages bodyguards, assign bodyguards that are similar to them in terms of size and hit points, or even a little lower. The purpose of the bodyguards is basically to give the mage time to cast more spells and or run away. These guys can bodyguard tyrants, who are tough enough to take it if somebody targets them and are probably going to be targeted anyway, but they should not bodyguard, even assuming they could be assigned to oppressors. You should not use things like this to bodyguard oppressors. If you summon ogres, you should not use ogres as mage bodyguards. You can put them in separate squads in front of the mages, or behind the mages to catch flyers, but do not put them with the mages, because that means all those thunderstrikes and stuff that are targeting your archers targeting your ogres, will be targeting your mages. What else? What have I not talked about? Targeting orders for troops with ranged weapons. For most troops, you can target archers, cavalry, flyers, monsters, or closest enemy. Of note, large enemy means, I believe, size 5 or above. Size 4 units are not preferentially targeted. So you use targeting, basically you use these to try and direct your archers to kill the highest value targets or the most damaging targets. If you have crossbowmen who penetrate armor and the enemy has heavily armored elite cavalry, targeting enemy cavalry with them can be extremely useful. Targeting enemy flyers basically means your archers are going to be shooting into your own backfield, because that is where the flyers are going. That can be risky, very, very risky, because your archers might shoot themselves or your own mages. If your enemy has a lot of valuable flyers, or a lot of fragile flyers that archers can kill quickly, it might be your only good tactic. But, risky. Closest enemy is the most reliable targeting. I believe it always targets the physically closest squadron. It's also the least useful for that reason. The closest squadron is usually going to be an arrow catcher that you don't necessarily want to be targeting. If you have high damage output archers, targeting enemy archers can be really, really useful because you can whittle them down quickly before area buffs like flaming arrows have a chance to wreck your army, and before they can before they can accomplish much. If you can rout the enemy archers and they have a large archer contingent, that can also push you close to HP routing the enemy army. Remember, an army automatically routs everybody except berserkers if they have lost 75% of the HP on the field, and routing off the battlefield counts as a loss. So if you can get a chain rout going, firing at typically low morale, low protection troops like archers, you might be able to chase the entire enemy army off the field and kill them as they run. In general, large enemy monsters is a useful targeting order for enemy armies that contain super combatants, or thugs that they have made out of giants or something. In some cases, targeting enemy cavalry can be extremely useful. For example, there's at least one nation, I'm trying to remember what the name of it is, it's one of the elf nations that I don't really play, where all of their expensive mages are cavalry, are mounted on horses, and none of their standard regular recruit troops are. So if you target enemy cavalry, I think it's man, I want to say? I don't remember. In any case, in situations like that, if you target enemy cavalry, it's basically the same as targeting mages. Now, troops cannot use the target rearmost enemies order. I don't know why, but it just as a balance mechanic, they can't do that. Commanders can. Commanders can target the rear. This is another reason why you don't want to have your mages in the back, because if you have an enemy commander, a scout or something with a ranged magical weapon, then they're at risk of being shot to death. The Just Man's Cross is an extremely poor ranged weapon, to be honest. It's good against big beefy demons, and that's about it. But even so, it has long range, +4 precision, and high armor-piercing damage. If you have somebody holding, like, a thunderbow that does area shock damage, or a golden arbalest that fires very, very rapidly and with +10 precision, then anything that's in the rear can be at serious risk of being shot down by a random scout with something like this. So yeah, keep your mages from being the rearmost thing on the battlefield at all costs once items and spells start coming out. You need at least a couple of squads in the backfield to absorb arrows and spells and to distract flyers. This kind of formation that I'm using here is fairly vulnerable just because it's made of squishy humans. If a bunch of griffins land in the middle of this formation, they're screwed. They're just doomed. So, you don't want to mix too many troops into here, but you may want to have a few. What I typically like to do is put some squadrons in the back, and then set them on hold and attack closest, or hold and attack flyers. And so they'll stand there for 2 rounds, then they'll start to move forward. As they move forward, they'll end up mixed in with the mages while they're moving, and they'll tend to be in with the mages around rounds 3 or 4, which is when enemy flyers will be coming down, because enemy flyers tend to be set on hold and attack rear, which means they're going to wait 2 rounds, then they fly up on round 3, and I believe at the beginning of round 4 they land. So if you have a squadron back here that starts moving up round 2, it gets to about here or so, or here, ideally, and then flyers land on it. If flyers don't land on it, they land on the mages, and the infantry can immediately advance to engage them and limit the damage. You usually can't stop people from killing some of your mages if you have a lot of mages in a mid-game battle, and they have flyers or damage spells. You can limit the damage, and that's what you want to do, because mages are expensive. Even cheap mages are much more expensive than units, and they're recruitment limited because you can only get 1 per turn per fort most of the time. So keeping as many mages alive as possible and killing as many of the enemy mages as possible is your main goal. Killing troops, honestly kind of secondary. You need to kill troops to win battles, but killing mages is what wins wars. Battlefield clear spells are something you have to kind of take into consideration sometimes, but they're not exactly a scripting issue. They're more of a general tactical issue, so I'm not going to talk about them right now. I think that's everything I wanted to talk about in this video. If there's something that you're still curious about or something that I didn't explain properly, I'm sorry. Leave a comment or hit me up on Discord or something. I'll try to clarify. But hopefully this gave you a little bit of food for thought. Just to reiterate general principles. Most infantry up front, archers in the back, cavalry on the flanks. You need blockers in the back line. In the mid-game, focus on having at least 1 or 2 squads of dedicated spell catchers, for which you want basically high HP and nothing else. Ogre summons, vine ogres, free spawn animals like wolves or mouflons that you can get a ton of to create a big fat blob of HP, something. Giants, cavemen, if you can recruit cavemen from a cave, work well at this. But they're very useful in the mid-game. Have your mages distributed somewhat. Do not stack mages up in a couple of squares, because that is asking for one unlucky fireball to roast 400 gold of your capital recruitment. Damage spellcasters need to be sort of in the midline. Buff spellcasters need to be right up close nearby what they're buffing. Global enchantment spellcasters can be anywhere, and summon spellcasters should be close to the front but away from your infantry, unless you're summoning something that is specifically you want to be mixed in with the infantry, in which case your summon caster should be like right here. So hopefully that was somewhat helpful. Like I said, if you have any more questions, by all means give me a ring, and I'll see you in the next one.